Goldfish, how open are you about your hobbies?
Is what I do even a hobby anymore? As always, welcome back old viewers, and thanks again for continuing to watch my content, and welcome new viewers! I am Runaway Goldfish, or citruskoin on Twitch. I'm an artist building my cartoon from the ground up and documenting every step along the way. If you want to learn more about me, please be sure to check out my links down below. To recap my last video, I wanted to share bits of my adventures during that week and show off some of the work that I've done so far. But for today's video, I wanted to expand on a question that someone asked me about my openness about what I do. To be more specific, they had asked me how open I was about my hobbies, and hobbies being my art. At first, I was confused by the question, but I forget sometimes that not everyone monetizes their art, nor do they ever want to. But the question has really inspired me to make today's video and address my experience with it. But before I go into detail, I think it's important to note a couple things. The first thing is asking what is a hobby and at what point does it stop becoming a hobby? Well, by definition, a hobby is an activity that someone does during their leisure time, and I think everyone has their own thoughts on the second statement, but I think whatever your activity is, it stops becoming a hobby the moment you get either regularly paid for it, or when it starts becoming investment towards getting paid for it. And even though becoming an artist was something I had written about in What I Want to Be When I Grow Up 5th grade project, alongside professional snowboarder and Olympic martial artist, it was something I never really considered as a viable option walking into adulthood, nor was it really an idea that was ever nourished or supported. It's also important to note that I'm not a super famous artist, at least yet, nor am I like super rich or anything, but I am someone who has experience in retail and selling art and art services, honestly since elementary school, just kind of going into adulthood as a side hustle. But right now I do enough to supply my business. I live humbly with simple pleasures. I'm also grateful to be in a position and have enough support to pursue my endeavors, but I have aspirations that are a lot larger than that. I also want to note that I did not just drop my whole life to become an artist. I made sure to really look at my financial situation, weigh out the risks in my personal life, and made a thoughtful decision before diving in. After carefully going through my options, making art was actually the most practical option, surprisingly enough. At the same time, I had to be okay with the fact that this may not work out at all, and that's still a possibility. And speaking of support, as always, I want to shout out to all my subscribers and followers out there on Twitch and YouTube who are always there to cheer me on and keep me company as I'm working. If you would like to watch me on my live streams, you can visit me at twitch.tv/citruskoin. I also want to thank my patrons for allowing me to be honest with them in my process and just continuing to support my project every month. So shoutouts to Chris, Fizzy Fairy Apothecary, Sergeant Hardcore, It's a Trap Productions, Kim Cookies, and King Shabooboo. If you would like more insight about some of the things I do away from YouTube and off stream, while also supporting myself as an artist, you can visit patreon.com/mygoldfishbowl, where you can check out all my tiers, their benefits, and how your patronage gets used. Alright guys, so just to be upfront, I am recording the next day. This is the next part, so if my voice sounds a little bit different, that is why. But I wanted to go back to the subject matter of how open am I about talking about my hobbies. Although the initial push to transition from art as a hobby to, you know, a job or a career path, personally was mostly due to being in a hard situation, and it also helped having, you know, friends and family members, mentors who really believed in my ideas, but also with the help of, you know, other artists and entrepreneurs that I've met or that really inspire me, that have already created these pathways for me. But, you know, and I just feel like I'm making this statement just to put it out there. If you know a friend or a family member or a colleague trying to pursue their dreams, if their ideas aren't harming anyone or themselves, like, please don't douse their fire. Like, at the very least, just cheer them on. Just last year of the month. But anyways, to answer the question of whether or not what I do is still a hobby, hail to the no. Being shy, imposter syndrome, fear, doubt, and all these other things are just all things I've faced when finally admitting that I wanted to take something that most people see as a hobby and make it a career. At the very least, I want it to be a stepping stone towards one, especially since the only time this question really comes up is when introducing myself. I was gonna say yourself, but myself. And I don't know if other people are like this. I know there's some people are, but I don't know if it's a more majority, but the anxiety of the first impression is at all-time high for me. So, in fact, actually, this happened to me recently when I had to introduce myself to my new hairstylist, since my current hairstylist that I usually use is, she was out for surgery or something. So, I want to address how did I become more comfortable about being open about my art. Even though my anxiety can get pretty bad, especially since COVID has made talking to people really weird, I've had to come to terms with the fact that it was going to be a necessary fact of life, especially if I was going to make it a career. And as important as I think social media is, I truly believe the real good stuff, the good stuff, are the interactions you have with other business owners, clients, and most importantly, anyone who could be a potential client. So that could be, just random people that you meet. But also accepting that not every interaction is going to be golden. For example, let me tell you about my experience my first time I pitched my comic to a comic shop. Alright, so when I first decided to go pitch to a local comic shop, which I had been going to since a kid. I stopped going for a while because I lived out of the area, but the moment I kind of moved back into that same area, I was like, okay, that's gonna be the place, that's going to be it. So I walked into the comic shop and things were, I kind of like browsing around, and like they're kind of familiar with me and seeing me around, and I was like, hey, I make art. I have this comic that I'm doing. It's my first one. I was hoping that you can give me a chance and allow me to have some shelf space here. And they're like, and I will note that, since COVID, I realized I kept tripping on my words, and I feel like sometimes I still do, because I haven't had to really practice. I feel like right now my most practice that I have in speaking is through my live streams. But I'm kind of stumbling through my words, and I'm trying to tell him, hey, I really want to have an opportunity here. And he was really cool about it. And then we finally got to the point where he was like, well, what's your comic about? And because I had been typing it out during the whole quarantine, I realized I haven't verbally pitched my comic to somebody before. It has always been in like typing form, or it's been a script, or just, it just was really weird. So I start like, saying like random phrases like, oh, it's about this girl, she's a goldfish, and like it's very painful. And then I ended with a yeah. So he was like, okay, I think I get it. And I walked out of the comic shop, and I just remember sitting in my car. I was just like, oh my god, that was so terrible. That was absolutely terrible. And just, I drove home, and then I kind of sat on the couch and really reflected upon it for a quick minute. And then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna try that again. And this time I'm going to bring literature. I had literature for the comic to make sure, it was easy for people to communicate like what it's about, but I I brought literature with me so I could drop it off at the comic shop, and then I drove back. Like, I drove back and I walked in the store and goes, oh, hey, what's going on again? And I'm like, hey, I just wanted to say, you know, I apologize about like how I said it. It occurred to me that like the only time I've ever pitched it was like through the internet. So I realized I haven't been able to, you know, verbally pitch it to you. But I just want to let you know, I have literature for the comic. You know, if you have any questions, you know, you can let me know. And that's how I basically redid my opportunity. And the thing is, like, I'm human. I still trip up, you know, but I have to keep making steps forward. Otherwise, you know, any lessons learned, any wisdom for what I learned from past experiences, all of it just gets wasted. So you really have to allow yourself to make these mistakes. But personally, I think I was really lucky that the store owner was a really laid-back guy and was totally understanding. But I have to really bank on that. Not all interactions are going to be that way. And as nervous as it may be for some people, I think it's also important to really rely on friends or family for practice, feedback, and confidence building so you don't mess up during the real thing. And I'll be honest, that's something I did not do. But with that said, you know, you also have to be okay with the fact that your friends might look at you crazy. It may say things that you don't want to hear, but honestly, you have to accept, like, that's the whole point, you know, of feedback. So, you know, be grateful, and if they're the real ones, they'll support you even if you don't take their advice, or even if, you know, they don't quite understand your ideas or your vision. But, you know, it's when you start to notice your personal life really spill into your professional life, they will be the ones to really help you keep it together. Now, for me personally, talking to less familiar family members was and is the most difficult hurdle when talking about what I do. I'm talking about, you know, the aunts and uncles that you only see a few times a year, or, you know, those family members who just have like very strong opinions about things, and, you know, and sometimes they don't even have to be like people that you don't see often. Sometimes they are just people in your own household. And in theory, your family should be supportive, which I personally could, you know, make a whole other video in itself, but I understand that it could raise heavy skepticism, and it's, you know, it's absolutely valid and understandable. You know, I know that they have good intentions, you know, but personally, since I've put myself out there, I've really opened myself up to other opportunities, and you really have to lean on these moments of opportunity when your family doesn't necessarily see your vision. Even though their intentions are to protect you, sometimes the intention often has become more of an obstacle on the pathway to, at least to my personal success. And when I'm faced with that situation, I ended up just going back, or, you know, finding that group of people who are capable of giving me criticism while still wanting me to succeed in what I do. And building up that group, that process takes time, and it isn't easy, but if you persist, you know, keep an open heart, open mind, you will find them. And just take note that sometimes it's just one or two people, and that's all you need. You don't need to have, like, you know, 1 million followers or anything like that. Even though it sucks, I also want to say, don't devalue that experience. If anything, let the doubt fuel you, and let it be practice for things that people are going to say to you in, you know, the quote-quote real world. You know, with the internet these days, you've probably seen everyone's way more eager to express what they don't like more than what they do like, and once you've accepted that, it doesn't stop the impact of those comments, unfortunately. But personally, I think it does make it easier for them to roll off your shoulders. Now, because I'm still pretty novice, I don't know if it gets any easier to deal with as you get more popular, but I personally like to think so. So we've talked about how to better talk about my hobbies with other people, but I feel like the overlooked part of that is also knowing when not to talk about your hobbies, and this could be controversial. After hearing this segment, let me know what you think. But for example, I'm talking about your hobbies, let's say in the workplace. And of course this varies from place to place, but there are stories where the more vocal you are as a person, and you're talking about your personal life and other things that you do outside of your job, sometimes it can make the job more difficult. And it sucks because I would never want to give the advice of silencing yourself, but knowing when to talk, or I guess knowing when not to talk, is just as much of a skill as the actual talking. And why is that important? Well, once you've learned that skill, you can be more deliberate and intentional with the people you interact with when talking about your hobby turned to business. Energy is currency. You don't waste your time and energy being around people who aren't worth it or who aren't going to raise you up. Like I said, this is a skill, so you really have to learn how to read the room. But this concept is really inspired by one of my favorite quotes. And it's work hard in silence and let your success be your noise. Once you finally put in the work and finish projects, you also have more confidence going into opportunities to talk about your hobbies. And I think people respond a little bit better when you bring those things up. And I'll be honest, this is something I still need to work on too. I'll admit it was scary because I had no idea how this art thing was going to work out, and there's still plenty of opportunity for it not to, but I'm trying not to manifest that. But like most people, I was scared by the idea of becoming the starving artist and the slow progress. But I've mentioned it before. Ever since I've opened myself up to these opportunities, I finished my own comic, and if you want to read it, you can go to my website, runawaygoldfish.com. Link down below. But anyways, I've worked on designs for wedding invitations. I'm working on a children's book, and I'm on my way to making another children's book. I've got another project lined up. I'm doing animations, and there's just so many projects in the works on top of my own work, on my own personal projects. But this is why I say to never be too good for information, good and bad. But once I started making my first sales, I made sure to invest back into my business. So when someone asks me, what do? I tell them confidently and firmly because I have to. I understand not everyone has to monetize their art, but at the same time, not everyone's art is their hobby. And sometimes when push comes to shove, you really have to look around at the resources around you and get creative with your options. And the way I see it, art really only requires a drawing surface, an idea, a ton of patience, and a touch of customer skills. And even though it's scary managing myself, it's really rewarding managing my own schedule, creating my own culture around me, and because of that, I can dream a little bit bigger than just drawing from project to project. Like many other artists, it would be an absolute dream to be able to start my own studio, but before I can do that, I gotta put in the work first. Like everyone else, I gotta put in the hours. I have to be open to continuous learning and be deliberate in everything I do, even off my off hours. And it sounds like a lot of work, which I will say it is. It really is. But just like any job, I'm spent at the end of the day and sometimes have to work longer hours than usual, but that's part of it. But I don't want to tell people to quit their job and then pursue their dreams. That would just be so wrong. And I would never wish my situation on other people ever. But with my situation, it allowed me to reflect on what I really love to do when I am at my lowest, which is to create, and there really shouldn't be any shame in that. And while we're at it, we shouldn't be shamed for having these sort of skills either. So in conclusion, I guess nowadays I am very open about my art. My art is now more than a hobby, but I'm also strategic in how I talk about it. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I've been making efforts to try to make shorter videos, but I'm starting to learn that sometimes, like, in doing these sort of, I guess, vlogs, sometimes that's just not possible if I want to get a complete thought out. But if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, hit that bell button for notifications on my newest videos, and be sure to be the first to know about my newest content. And to learn more about how I got to where I am now, feel free to explore my other videos on my channel. So stay creative, stay kind, and never be afraid to jump your fishbowl. Bye!